All right, good morning, everybody. Thanks for joining me. This is the last day of June, so July is already here, just about. So go ahead and get your questions posted in there. It's either going to be, if you're on a mobile device, it's going to be below the video. If you're on a normal laptop, desktop computer, something like that, it's going to be to the right of the video, I believe. So and then just type your questions in there and we'll get them answered. I always start with questions that go. Post it on here. Just copy and paste in there. It will get answered during the office hours here. Oops, saying that connection is limited. Sorry if this is cutting in and out. I will try closing some things here to make this a little bit better, hopefully. Hopefully that helps a little bit. Yeah, so sorry about that. I'm just trying to get some things closed out so it can run a little bit faster because it was telling me it was. All right, hopefully this is better now, hopefully. Sorry for the delay, folks. I'm just trying to, internet must be really slow today. All right. Man, it is really acting slow. So hopefully it doesn't get too bogged down. But get started with Mayor A. So like I said, if you posted your question more than an hour ago, just copy and paste and it'll get answered. I do that so I can answer questions for people who are here live watching the office hours. So Mayor A asks, hi Q, thanks again for your help. My first question from yesterday in shallowing the club. I get the turning of the doorknob to the right properly, but I can't seem to incorporate the twisting of the club face. Would love some suggestions. So yeah, that's just the tennis racket drill. So the twisting of the club face is coming from your wrist kind of working together, right? So it's called flexion and extension of the wrist. So our lead wrist, we want to have flexion or bowing, Dustin Johnson at the top of the swing, he won this weekend. He's like this. He's got crazy amount of flexion in his wrist there at the top. So he's got that club face really, really closed at the top of the swing. So that's one piece of it. But we also have to have the extension in the trail wrist. So this is the knuckles kind of bending back toward the elbow. Those have to be working together. So that's what closes the club face. So if you imagine if I take the club face like this, right, and I have it lined up at the back of my wrist here, if I do both of those motions, right, that's closing the club face. Well, what you were talking about earlier, the turning of the doorknob, that's pronation and supination, right? So that's the rotation of my wrist. That's rotation, right? So we're basically, what's going on is you're going like this, right? So you're twisting and then you're going in flexion and extension like that, right? So that's what the wrists are doing, is this kind of motion. So I'm going up to the top and then I'm turning and I'm flexing, I'm rotating, I'm rotating my wrist. That's turning the doorknob and squaring the face. So watch here, I'll just turn the doorknob. That's what turning the doorknob looks like. Now I'm going to square the face, but I'm doing those at the same time. So as I'll do it in super slow motion. That's what I'm trying to do. And I just really, really exaggerate that tennis racket drill as much as you can. To get to the tennis racket drill, if you're not familiar with what it is, it's basically what the move is. It's shallowing out the club, squaring the face earlier. That allows us to stay in our posture and rotate into contact. So yeah, that's basically what that is. If you want to get to the tennis racket drill, just click the house icon at the top of the screen. That'll take you to the home page. Scroll down the home page, you'll see a list of all the courses. Click on the move course. I believe it's the third video, 1.3 in the move course is a tennis racket drill. My last question is, how do you achieve a bent right arm at impact? What is the result of? I see many good ball strikers at impact with a bent right arm. It comes from rotation. So basically, if I'm rotating my body correctly, right, and I'm sequencing correctly, I can come into contact like this with that bent right arm. So if you see here, I'm coming into contact with this like a bent right arm. So the people who are straightening their arms are because they're not rotating. So if I don't rotate, I have to fire this club to get to the golf ball. And now I'm like this, right? And that usually comes from coming down steep and or having an open face as we're coming down, because we have to save it at the end. So if I'm coming down steep, like this, I've got to typically, to get this club back on plane, I'm going to have to stand up. When I stand up, that raises the handle, drops the head onto plane, and now I have this club on plane or closer to on plane. And but now I have to, because I've stood up, I have to throw my arm at it, right? I have to throw the club because I can't continue to rotate. One, because I stood up, I've lost the flex in my legs, and I can't really rotate when I don't have any flex in my legs. And also because I won't be able to get to the golf ball. If I got forward shaft lean here, I'm a foot above the golf ball. So I have to release the club to get to the golf ball. And to release the club, you got to straighten out that arm and throw the club. So that's part of it. Another part of it is the face being open. So if maybe I am shallowing out the club, but I have this face, kind of wide open, right? So what ends up happening is that I've got to release. Basically, releasing the club early is a means that a lot of people use to square up the face or close the face. So if I get here, maybe I'm in great position here, but I have this face wide open. I have to release that club to square up the face. And in order to release the club, I got to straighten out my right arm when I release that early. Because when we get to impact correctly, we're straightening out that right arm, but that's happening in that straight line release position where all of my angles are gone. If I rewind that to impact, I'm right here. I have more of a bent lead arm. So that's basically, it comes from proper sequencing and rotation, getting that kind of position right there, that bent right arm position. So Greg P says, trouble with the move at the top, speed of transition. Can I arrive at the top with preset max wrist bowing already, then drive forward and rotate while dropping and shallowing the club into the slot? Yes, you can absolutely do that. I think it's a more difficult way to do that. Again, we talked about Dustin Johnson earlier. There's a lot of tour players that are like this at the top of the swing. Brooks is kind of more like this, right? But Dustin's like this. Jon Rahm's like this. Daniel Berger's like this. There's a lot of great players on tour that have that crazy bowed wrist position. Yes, you can do that. And trust me, I have tried it. It is not easy to do, and it hurts my wrists to do it. So yes, you can, but are you physically capable of doing it? I don't think a lot of people are. I think there are, I'm not physically capable of doing it without my wrists really hurting like crazy. The easiest and I think the best way to do it is to arrive at the top with a flat or slightly bowed kind of wrist. If you have a really strong grip, you can have a little bit more of a cup in there. And when I say strong grip, I mean that's how your hands are oriented on the club. So if my hands are more on the side of the club like this, you can be at the top of the swing with a little bit more of a cup. That's fine because your face is closed a little bit more. But if you have a neutral to weak grip, definitely if you have a weak grip, you need to have flat or slightly bowing here at the top. But if you can get in this kind of position and be in good shape, then great. But the thing is that you have to keep that, right? Just like Dustin Johnson, you have to keep that. Now, he actually releases it a little bit as he comes into contact. He's not like this at contact. He's like this at the top, and then he kind of releases. He's still bowed at impact. It's basically going from here's the top of his swing, there's impact, right? That's basically where he's getting to. So if that works for you, yes, absolutely, you can do that. But I'm telling you, it's a tough thing to do. But it's worth trying because if it works for you, then hey, that's what you should do. There's a lot of different ways to do it. The way that we teach in the move, I think, is the easiest, and the way that's going to work the best for most people is basically the tennis racket drill where we're getting, because no matter what, you need to be doing this in the downswing. Even if you're like this, you need to have that happening. You need to have the club shallowing in the downswing. It just maybe it's already happening as far as the squaring of the face has already happened here. And then as you're coming into impact, you can kind of release it a little bit. But I'm telling you, it's a tough thing to do. It's a really, really athletic move for sure. So John N says, hello, Q. I was unable to hear your answer to a question I asked yesterday. Do you have any hints to help prevent short follow through on putts causing bad misses? So one thing I want to mention is that if you have to take off for any reason, we archive all of these. So we archive all of the office hours. So if you miss your question, just go to the office hours highlights page, and you can do that by going to the top of the page, hover your mouse cursor over office hours. That'll expand a menu, and then click the office hours highlights. If you go below the highlights for the week, you'll see all the archived office hours. You can watch all of them. So yesterday's is on there if you want to go check that out. But basically, one thing we have to understand is that that is not necessarily a bad thing. If you look at Brent Snedeker, right, the pop stroke has worked really well for a lot of people. So it may just be about getting the pop stroke. You know, if that's what feels natural to you, you know, there's nothing wrong with that. So you know, you can putt really well with a pop stroke, as we've seen with Brent Snedeker, and there's been a lot of other tour players that have used a pop stroke as well. So you don't necessarily have to change it. You may just want to get better at it. Now, if you want to change it, what I would do is I would put basically, if we grab a putter here, I would just have you know, some tees on the ground. So if you're hitting a ball, you can put a tee, you know, kind of right here and right here, and you can practice going the same length back and the same length through, and kind of basically accelerating through that a little bit. So instead of going like that, you can put something. So let's say that ball is a tee, and then let's say this ball is a tee. Put an equal lengths on each side. So that's about equal lengths on each side, and I can practice basically hitting this ball where I go back to that tee and go forward to that tee. That's what I would be doing. And you can do some practice strokes. So I just kind of do some practice strokes. I'm going back and forth to the tees, right? I'm not going like that. I'm going back and forth to the tees. And then I would go step in, and I'd take the same kind of stroke. That's all I would recommend doing. But like I said, pop stroke is not necessarily a bad thing. Matthew S. says, hi, Q. On full shots, I feel that my left elbow is straight and locked. I'm struggling with chipping and pitching, and that left elbow. Should I have that sensation that my left elbow is locked, or should I feel slightly bent? Thanks. So one thing, feel is all relative. So what you feel and what I tell you are going to be completely two different things. What I feel and what you feel might be two completely different things. So I wish it was easy to answer questions like, do I feel this, that? The easiest way to think about it is you want to adjust your feel to get the desired result that you want, right? So if you feel like your left elbow is really causing you issues with your pitching and chipping, it's not likely the reason. Just in my experience, I haven't found that really being, I mean, because you can have that left elbow kind of locked and not basically have a straight lead arm. I mean, most players have straight lead arms. I would just try to feel like you're more relaxed and that your hands are moving more out away from your body and moving very wide. That's typically works really well for chipping and pitching. But like I said, everything you do, whenever you're talking about feel, you're just wanting to adjust your feel to get the desired result that you want. Because feel is relative, and feel isn't always real, right? What we feel is happening is not necessarily the reality of what's going on. So the best advice I can give you about feel is to adjust your feel to get the desired result that you want. So for example, let's say somebody is swinging over the top, right? Somebody's swinging over the top. What they're feeling, this is probably what they feel like. They feel like they're swinging perfectly on plane, everything is great. But the reality is that this is what's happening. So adjusting their feel to get the desired result would be they need to feel like they're doing this. They need to feel like they're swinging way from the inside to get that club to be on plane. So it's all about adjusting feel to get the desired result. It's all relative. So you know, it's just really, Matthew, it's just hard to say. I haven't really heard of anybody. Now, if you're locked in a sense that you have so much tension in your arms that you can't hardly move, then that is an issue. You need to relax, loosen up the grip a little bit. You're probably putting a lot of tension in the grip. Loosen up the grip a little bit, relax the arms, and just try to feel like your arms are working out wide and away from your body. And that will more than likely help out quite a bit. But like I said, it's hard for me to help you if I'm not right there with you, just because I don't know exactly what's going on. But hopefully that helps. So Richard M says, I'm a new member. Is there a video or can you give me some advice on hitting chips and pitches off of very tight lies? Thanks. Yeah, so I think we do have a video on this. Let me, I can give you I can see if I can find the video, and then I can talk about it as well. All right, let's see here. I think that we do. It might be Hard Pan is what the video might be called. So Hard Pan's kind of the same thing. I think it is Hard Pan. It was several years ago that we made this video. Yep, how to chip and pitch off hard pan. So SH021. Richard, if you're a new member, you may not be familiar with our search engine on the website. And if you're on I'm not sure if you're on a laptop or a mobile device or a desktop or whatever, but if you're on a desktop or a laptop, in the upper right-hand corner, you'll see a search window. So you can search videos, SH021, how to chip and pitch off hard pan. And we did hard pan one word for some reason. I think hard pan's 2 words. But maybe it is 1 word. I'm not really sure. But so yeah, that's one way to find it. If you're on a mobile device, if you go in the upper right-hand corner of your screen, there's an icon there that's 3 horizontal lines. If you select that, that'll expand the menu. Scroll down on that menu and you'll find the search box there. SH021. You can also go to the Short Game Vault, which is where this video is. So if you go to the top of the page there, you see instruction. Hover your mouse over that, then go to Vault Categories, and then when you get to the Vault Categories, click the Short Game. It's in alphabetical order. So go to the Short Game Vault, and it's in there. But basically, you know, it's not much different chipping and pitching off of hard pan. It's just that there's a lot less margin for error, right? So one thing that can make it easier is if you have green to work with. I don't really recommend using a wedge. I would try to hit more of a chip kind of shot, because what's going to end up happening if it's a very, very tight lie is the leading edge of your club may want to dig a little bit. And if it digs at all behind the golf ball, you're done. You're going to chunk it, right? So, and you may thin it if it, you know, if you don't get into the ground at all. So what I recommend, you know, if you have green to work with, the easiest way would be to use like an 8-iron or, you know, a putter. You know, a putter is oftentimes, you know, getting it rolling. You know, if it's a very tight lie, it's probably going to roll pretty good. So depending on where you are on the green, what I'd recommend is, or around the green, is putting it if you can. If you're really far off the green and you need to get something in the air on the green, I would use as little loft as possible to make that happen, because anything with a lot of loft is going to have this leading edge. It's going to want to dig. Now, if you have to hit a wedge shot, then or if you have to hit a wedge to get it up in the air, it's further, then what I'd recommend doing is hitting your typical kind of pitch shot. So I can go over kind of what that is. You just have to have a little bit better, there's not a lot of margin for error in this shot. All right. So we have to use the bounce a little bit, and we have to get that bounce into the ground so that way it can slide on that tight lie. So what I would do is I would open up the face a little bit, right? So if we have it like this, that's going to get that leading edge going into the turf, which is going to make it dip. You don't want to do that. So I would hold it a little bit more upright, and I would open up the face a little bit. So holding it a little bit more upright, and then holding it and having the face a little bit more open. So if you watch like this, if I have forward shaft lean here, right, that leading edge is down. If I hold this more upright, right, so you can see now that brings the bounce into play. Now if I open it, that brings the bounce even more into play, right? So I'm just going to tip it to where it's a little bit more vertical, maybe a degree of forward shaft lean. And I'm going to open the face about 15 degrees. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take a shot, and I'm just going to try, just take some practice swings where you're coming in and you're just coming in really nice and shallow. So you want to come in very, very shallow, wide hands, right? Nice wide hands here. If you just lift up the club like this in a lot of wrist hinge and then drop it down, you're going to be coming down steep. That's going to bring that leading edge into play. So nice, and my dog's here, so I don't want to hit her, but nice and shallow, nice wide hands, and feeling that bounce kind of hitting the turf there, right? And that's going to allow you a little bit of margin for error to be able to get this club to slide underneath it. And that's all I would recommend doing, is just get this a little bit more vertical, get the face a little bit open, nice wide hands back and through, slide that club right underneath it, and it'll be pretty good for you. Now this shot will typically have a lot of spin because it's, if you're hitting a wedge shot, a very tight lie, you're probably not getting a lot of grass between the ball in the club face. You're opening the face, which is adding a little bit of loft. It's going to add a little bit of spin. So you may want to plan on this ball carrying a little bit further and having a little bit of stopping power. But it is a higher degree of difficulty shot for sure, because there's less margin for error there. So Richard H says, what is the best swing pattern for a bunker shot with a firm to hard sand and dirt mixture? So it's very similar to what you would do in kind of a fluffy, typical sand bunker, but you just make a couple adjustments. So let's just go over what a normal bunker shot would be and then the adjustments. So normal bunker shot, we want to open up the face 45 degrees. This is a big mistake I see people make. They either don't open up the face at all, or they just open it up a little bit. Get that face wide open. Just like we talked about in the previous video, we want to expose the bounce a little bit. This is most important when we're in the sand. The reason is that if we hit this sand, if we hit this leading edge into the sand like this, right? It's almost like a water skier. If you imagine a water skier that's going on top of the water there, if it dips that nose of the ski down into the water, it's just going to dive into the water. That's the same thing that happens with the club. If we get this club working down into the sand with the leading edge, it's just going to get lost in the sand. It's not going to get to your golf ball, right? So we want to open the face, which exposes that bounce a lot more. So that way it can kind of glide on top of the sand, just like the water skier. With that nose up, it's just staying right on top of the water. That's what we want this club to do. So open up that face 45 degrees. So that would mean if this is straight up and down, I'm going to take that face and I'm going to rotate it 45 degrees like that. So there's 45 degrees. All right. Then I'm going to play the ball a little bit forward in my stance in this area. So a little bit forward in my stance. And I'm going to try to hit the sand about 4 to 6 inches behind the golf ball and get this club to kind of glide through the sand. So where my club is contacting the sand is about in the middle of my stance. The ball is going to be about right here. Then it will exit the sand about by my dog's foot here. And that's going to allow that club to slide underneath it. Now, this is in a normal, nice, fluffy sand. When you run into kind of harder sand, maybe there's a hard layer underneath. Well, what can happen is if we do all that, this club, it may hit that sand and then kind of bounce off of it and then hit the ball. So what we want to do is just make a little bit of adjustments so that we can get the club to dig just a little bit. We want it to dig just a little bit. So instead of 45 degrees open with the face, And not all hard sand is created equal. Some's going to be harder than others. I mean, you just got, if you're not used to it, if it's not consistent or you don't have a really good handle on the specific sand that you're working on, it's kind of a guessing game. But hey, it's a hazard. You're not supposed to hit it there, so sometimes there's going to be some consequences for hitting the ball in a hazard. So, but what I'd recommend doing is just you open up the face a little bit less. If it feels like it's still pretty loose, maybe it's just wet. It's normally fluffy sand, but it's just wet sand. I would just open up the face about 30 degrees instead of 40 degrees. If it's concrete, hard as a rock, kind of sand, you may want to open up the face just 15 degrees, right? So it really just depends on the sand. And one thing you can do is when you get in the sand, you can kind of dig your feet into it to kind of get a feeling for it. Because maybe it looks nice and fluffy, but you dig your feet into it and you feel there's kind of a hard layer underneath. If that's the case, if it's fluffy on top, maybe just an inch of fluffy sand and then hard underneath, what I would do is I would maybe open up the face 30 degrees, right? If it's concrete, really, really hard dirt, you can tell the club, your feet aren't hardly digging in at all, then I would open up the face about 15 degrees, right? So that's the first thing I would do. The next thing I would do is you're going to play the ball a little bit further back in your stance. This is going to allow you to come in a little bit more steep and also hit closer to the golf ball. So instead of, with a normal bunker shot, we were 4 to 6 inches behind the golf ball, in front of the golf ball where the club was exiting. This one, probably 1 to 2 to 3 inches, somewhere in there, depending on if it's you can feel like you can get the club underneath it. I would say 3 inches behind the golf ball, 4 inches behind the golf ball will work. And the club's going to dig a little bit and it's going to come out. But if it's really super hard concrete sand, it might be 1 or 2 inches behind the golf ball that you need to hit into it with a slightly open face and getting that underneath. Now, keep in mind, the less you open up the face and the closer you hit to the golf ball, the less power you're going to need to get the club to go, because you're going to be catching more of the ball with the club. In a normal fluffy sand bunker, you're not hardly hitting the golf ball at all. In fact, you're hitting the sand and the sand's kind of throwing the ball out. That's essentially what's happening. But in a harder sand bunker, you're actually going to be catching some of the ball. Now, there's going to be sand between your face and the ball, but you're catching you're catching more of the ball. So you're not going to need to swing as hard when you do that. Now, I actually think it's easier to hit out of harder sand bunkers. I always thought this, so I wouldn't look at the bunker as, fluffier sand bunkers, I think are more difficult because the club can just get lost in there. Even if you're opening it and all that good stuff, I think they're way more difficult than now what makes sand game really difficult is when you're at a course and the sand's very inconsistent. It's really hard on one hole, really soft on another hole. When you're having to kind of change and guess what the conditions are, that's when it gets really, really tough. And that's what you find at a lot of public courses. But if all the sand is really hard, that's actually, I think that's easier than because you don't have to swing as hard. It's very close to what a normal pitch shot is. It's the only difference is that you're hitting a little bit behind the golf ball. You're basically chunking it intentionally a little bit. That's only the real big difference there. So Anthony M says, I'm in the compression line course at impact. Should my shoulders be square or slightly closed or open? They should be square to open or slightly open. Closed would be only if you're trying to hit a big hook. Typically, it's hard to get your body open enough with your shoulders closed because you're probably going to be swinging too much in to out if your shoulders are closed off at impact. So typically, if you look at most tour players, what you're going to see is that the shoulders are going to be square to slightly open. Some tour players, you'll see their shoulders are really open. Like Rory McIlroy. I mean, I've seen video of him where his shoulders are really open. Really, your shoulders can be as open. Your shoulders can be very open as long as they're swinging on plane. So what that means is, if you imagine I have a plane of glass here that goes down from my shoulders down to the golf ball. If my shoulders are like this, they're on plane, but they're very open, right? Or my chest is very, very open. My shoulders are pointing way off to the left, but they're still on plane, and they've just opened up a lot. So if I'm getting that club to be on plane with it only really matters what this club is doing. So like I said, if you look at Rory McIlroy, he gets his hands really, really deep and way, way behind him, and then he opens up a ton as he's coming into contact. He's kind of like this as he's coming into contact. So his shoulders are very open, and obviously that works for him, right? Number one player in the world. So that's because his shoulders are rotating on plane. Now, if you get to where your shoulders are open because you're like this, right? My shoulder plane is this way. That's going to be an over-the-top movement, right? So you need to get your body, the shoulders rotating on the correct plane as you're coming through. So a great drill for this, if you're struggling with this, would be the shoulder-to-shoulder drill. And basically what you're doing with this drill is you're putting the club across your shoulders, you're rotating back, and you're rotating through on that same plane there. So if you watch, if I rotate back and then my shoulders are really closed off, now you can see my shoulder plane is this way. Whereas if I rotate back and then I come over the top, now my shoulder plane is this way. So that you can open up the shoulders as much as you want as long as they're rotating on plane. Typically, you're not going to see your shoulders closed off, especially with tour players, unless you just see them trying to hit a big old snap hook where they're trying to get their path to work so much in to out to be able to make that happen. But even that's typically only slightly closed. So Manny says, on bunker shots, Clay advocates a flipping of the wrist. I'm confused what he means by that. So flipping of the wrist means this. Basically an early release of the club. The reason why you'd want to do that is because it exposes the bounce more, right? So like I talked about earlier, if I have this club vertical and instead of leaning forward, that exposes more of the bounce. So if I kind of flip this club through impact, that allows me to expose the bounce a little bit more, get it to glide through the sand a little bit better. So Byron H says, how upright do you want your swing path on the backswing of irons versus woods? Your irons are going to typically be more upright, but it's not by anything that you have to do consciously. It's not like, I have a wedge here. I think I'm going to swing this more vertical. It's just because the club is so much longer, the driver is so much longer. So if you watch here, I have a, let's go over here. Sorry, she's in the way. She's napping. If I have my driver here versus a wedge, you can see the difference there in the length of club. So when I bring this driver back, it's going to come back flatter. Whereas if I bring this wedge back, it's going to come back more vertically, just because the plane that they come on, if you look at the shaft plane, it's much more flat than the wedge here. So it's not something that you really have to think about or do. It's just something that happens naturally by virtue of the club being a lot longer. But yeah, shorter the club, the more upright the swing. The longer the club, the flatter it is. So Gary L says, having trouble hitting behind the ball when practicing the spine tilt course. So it sounds like you're not getting your weight shift to your lead side. So if you're normally like this, right? So straight up and down, and then you're going up to the top like this, and then you're kind of chopping down into the ball, and you go from that to, basically you're like this and you fall away and you're getting your ground contact at the normal spot. And then you go from that to angle the way at the top, and you kind of stay back, and you don't get that weight shift. Yeah, you're going to bottom out back here. So you need to make sure that you're getting that weight shift to your lead side. So we're loading up, and then in that last part of the backswing, you're getting momentum shift moving forward. You're getting pressure in that lead foot, and you're coming into contact. So if you're struggling with those tops, what I'd recommend doing is combining that spine tilt course with some of the drills from the stop chunking and topping course. So we have a special course that's for chunking and topping. I would pair that with your spine tilt course to make sure you're loading up properly and getting that good weight shift to your lead side. So To get to that course, click the house icon. That's going to take you to the home page. Work through those drills that are in the Stop Chunking and Topping bonus course. You'll find that course on that home page when you scroll down and see all the courses there. 20 plus courses on the website there. So James M says, Q, I don't do this every time, but when I finish the driver swing, I step forward like Gary Player. Yeah, that's completely fine. Nothing wrong with that. It just means you're getting all the way through the ball, letting your momentum come all the way through. If you're not flexible, right? If you're not flexible enough to kind of get your hips kind of pointing left of the target, and all those things, it's completely fine to swing through and kind of step through. That's completely fine. Look at Harold Varner, the third, right? So he actually swings through, and then he drags his foot. His foot drags all the way up like this because he must have an external rotation limitation in his hip that doesn't allow him to come all the way up. So he just kind of drags it all the way up like that. It's a modified version of a step through. So yeah, that's completely fine. So Johnny H says, how do you start your backswing? I can address the ball with a slight tilt away from the target, but it seems like I lose that tilt as I do my backswing. Any tips to help keeping the tilt through the backswing? Yeah, so basically you want to feel like your hips are turning, right? So what you may be doing is it sounds like you're kind of sliding your hips, and it may feel like turning, but you're probably not turning. So I'd be looking at your swing on video, but I would feel like your tailbone's kind of going toward the target, right? So like I was talking about earlier, everything's about adjusting your feel to get the desired result. Whenever you talk about feels, it's about adjusting your feel to get the desired result that you want. So if you look on video and you're doing this, you're losing that. You're maybe rotating a little bit, but you're also sliding here. This leg isn't staying angled in toward the body. It's kind of getting more vertical as you're going up the top. If you're swaying in the backswing, you need to do the opposite. You need to feel like you're doing the opposite. So the opposite of going like this, right, would be going like this. Like that. That's what I'd be feeling like what you're doing, is that you're pushing your tailbone kind of toward the target as you're going up the top. I feel like you're getting more angled away. And you know what? If you overdo it, then just ease off of the feeling a little bit, but just adjust your feel to get the desired result. Feel like you're really turning your back and turning your tailbone toward the target, and that's going to help you to get into that better tilt in the backswing. James M says, thank you, and you really have a good dog. Yeah, she just sits there and naps all day for the most part. So David G says, when trying to flatten out my swing and rotate my hips in the downswing, I frequently hit the ground behind the ball while hitting a tee shot. Why? It's probably because you're not rotating. So if I flatten this out, it's hard to say without seeing your swing, but if I flatten this out and then I just throw my arms at it, well, I'm going to be swinging way too much from the inside, and I'm going to be bottoming out my club over in this area. So what I have to do is when I flatten this out, I need to add the rotation in there so that that club works down on plane. So I would look on your video and see if you're rotating or not. If you're not, then you need to feel like as you go up to the top that you're starting to get down into your legs and you're reflexing these legs. I try to feel like almost like you're sitting down and sitting on a stool. That's what I'd be feeling like, because you can't, if your legs are like this, you're not going to be able to rotate. You need to get down, get these legs flexed, so that way you can rotate your body. Because otherwise, if you're shallowing out the club a lot and you just kind of go like this, you're going to hit that ground well behind the golf ball. So that's probably what's going on. It's hard to say without seeing your swing, but that's what I imagine is going on. So you need to make sure that you are actually rotating your hips, getting down and rotating your hips, getting that club to release out in front. If that club releases early, it's going to be hitting the ground before the golf ball, especially if you're getting that club shot. You could also not be getting a good weight shift. Like I said, I'm just kind of naming some things that may be going on. You're going to have to look on video to see what's going on. If you do want to sign up for swing reviews with me, I don't have any spots available right now, but go join my waiting list and I can take a look and tell you exactly what's going on. But you may be shallowing out this club and rotating, but hanging back essentially. So this is exaggeration, but it may be kind of like this, where you're really, really hanging back, and then you're hitting the ground before the golf ball. So we want to make sure that we're getting that weight shift and rotating, getting our pressure in that lead foot as well. So, like I said, if you want me to take a look, sign up for my waiting list. Click the get a review at the top of the page there. That'll take you to the swing review page, and join my waiting list. But check those things that I mentioned, and then adjust your feel accordingly to get the desired result that you want. So Anthony M says, any great tips on the 3-wood? All the clubs in my bag I hit well, and the 3-wood is inconsistent. Well, one thing is that the 3-wood is one of the toughest clubs to hit, right? Especially if you're hitting it off the turf. It's one of the toughest clubs to hit. So you and everybody else, it's not your most consistent club. But the biggest mistake that I see with people with the 3-wood is, one, they tee the ball too far forward. They tee it like they're hitting a driver. So, our driver, we want to play that basically straight down from the lead shoulder, somewhere in there. That's going to allow us to have this club bottom out and then work up into the golf ball. Obviously, if we're hitting off of a tee, we can do that because the ground's not in the way. But if we're hitting something off the turf, the ground is in the way. We can't hit up on the golf ball unless the ball is sitting up like it's on a tee. Then you can kind of get under it a little bit. But if it's not sitting up like it's on a tee, it's just on like a nice fairway or whatever, then we need to hit down into that golf ball. So you may be playing the ball too far forward in your stance. Typically, with a 3-wood, straight down from the lead of your, maybe one ball forward of that is pretty good. So somewhere in this area, just a little bit forward in the stance. This would be driver, right? This would be 3-wood. So that's going to allow you to come in nice and shallow, and you want to rough up the turf a little bit in front. You can get away with sweeping, depending on the lie. It really just depends. If the ball's sitting up, it's going to be sweeping. But if it's kind of a tight fairway or something like that, you're going to be roughing up the ground pretty good. If not, taking a little bit of a divot for sure. It really just depends on the lie. But yeah, that's the main thing that I see. And the other thing that I see is that people, because they play the ball too forward, they'll tend to kind of slide like this. They'll try to get to where they can hit it, and then in the backswing they kind of fall away, and then that's going to cause that low point to happen before the golf ball. So I just make sure that you're loading up, getting behind it, and then getting that weight shift to your lead side, so that way you kind of hit down and through it. So that would be the main things that I see people have issues. It's hard to say without seeing your swing with the 3-wood, but those are the main things that I see people have issues with the 3-wood. All right, so David G says, thanks, dude, no problem. Yeah, go ahead and keep the questions coming. And then we'll keep answering them. In the meantime here, I'm just going to check something. There we go. All right, so we got a question here from Barry. Barry says, aside from turning the hands to square the club face, are all motions of the golf swing strictly from feet, knees, hips, and shoulders? No, I mean, everything's moving. No, I mean, everything's moving. I mean, when I'm turning back, your head's moving around a little bit. The head's not completely still during the swing. Typically, you look at a tour player, their head maybe will come up a little bit in the very start, or it will stay the same. And then as they get up to the top, they'll get down a little bit lower. As they get down the downswing, they'll get lower, and it's moving forward. And then they come into contact. It's moved forward a little bit, and then after contact, they come all the way up. So the head's moving around. Your arms are moving around, right? Your elbows are moving. Your wrists are moving. There's lots of moving parts going on. So I would say no, it's not just the feet, the knees, the hips, and shoulders. No, the wrists, the elbows. I mean, all the joints are moving around. Your pelvis is moving. All that stuff is moving. So Anthony M says, how would you suggest controlling distances? What percent of full swing is taken off in the 3/4 L to L and 9 to 3? So to me, 3/4 L to L and 9 to 3, those are all the same thing. To me, this is a 3/4 swing. Basically, I like to think about it in a clock system. Here's how I essentially control my distances. I have basically, I have an understanding with all my clubs what choking up 1 inch on the club does, because when you choke up on it on the club, it makes it shorter, so you don't swing it as fast. When you don't swing as fast, it goes less distance. So if I choke up 1 inch, that takes off a certain amount. It's gonna be different with everybody depending on how much speed you have. But typically, if I choke up 1 inch, that takes off about eight yards. If I choke up 2 inches, that'll take off, about 15 yards off of my full distance. So if I'm choking up all the way, if this is a wedge, and let's say 56 degree, that's my 110 yard club, and I choke all the way down on this, and if I took a full swing with it, it would go about 95, right? If I went and did a 1 inch choke up, that would, and I took a full swing with it, it would go a little over 100. This is basically, that's my 100-yard swing right there. Is a 56 degree choked up 1 inch. That's basically gives me exactly 100 yards. Now beyond that, to take more off, I may take a 10:30 swing, a 9 o'clock swing, or a 7:30 swing. And basically, I think about that in a sense of my hands are positions on the clock. So this would be 9 o'clock swing, right? That's what would be there. That'd be a 10:30 swing, which basically a 10:30 swing is pretty much a full swing for me. And then a 7:30 swing would be in there. Now, let's say that my 9 o'clock swing choked up 1 inch. All right. Let's say that is a 90-yard shot. All right. And I have 85 yards. So all I'm doing is I'm just taking a little bit off of that. That's all I'm doing. So I'm maybe, instead, this would be a 90-yard shot. This would be a 90-yard shot. This would be like an 85-yard shot. I would just try to go a little bit short of that. I'm just trying to take a little bit off of it. It takes some practice, but that's how I control distance, is the length of the swing. Basically, it's all controlled with the amount of speed that you're putting into the club. Now, obviously, there's other things that happen. If you hit a higher or lower trajectory, if you cut it, if you hit a fade or a draw, that can add or take away yardage depending on what you're doing. Typically, if you hit a fade, it takes a little bit off there. There's some players that do that. If they're comfortable hitting a fade, they'll hit a little fade to bring it in a little bit higher and take a little bit off. So it really just depends. But for the most part, the easiest way for me to do it is how much I choke up on the club. That's going to take some yardage off, and the length of the swing takes some yardage off. So that's all I would do, is I would get an idea. And one thing you can do is you can take your Post-it note, and you can find out what all these distances are with all your clubs. So you can take every club in the bag, from your wedges all the way up to your 3-iron, your hybrids, or whatever it is, and you can figure out how far they go, measure how far they go based on choking it up 1 inch, 2 inches with 10:30, 9 o'clock, and 7:30 swing. And that way you can have you can just take the club out of the bag, like, okay, well, I need to hit this shot this far. You can take the club out of the bag and say, okay, well, I know this club will go this far with a choked up 1 inch, 9 o'clock swing, and then get into it. Typically, you're only doing these with your shorter clubs, right? Your wedges and things like that. But yeah, if you have an idea of how much choking up 1 inch does on your distance, then you can pretty much know through the bag what's going to happen. That's what I'd recommend doing. So Johnny A says, thanks for the help. Just out of curiosity, how far do you hit your driver? Also out of curiosity, what loft wedges do you carry? Like 56, 60? Which one do you use around the green? So how far did I hit my driver? My playing speed right now is about 118, 120. A good drive for me is typically 300 yards, 310 yards, somewhere in there. Just depends on the conditions. As far as wedges are concerned, I carry a 50, a 54, and a 58. I used to carry a 52, a 56, and a 60, but I just got used to the lower lofts a little bit, and I like those. There's a little better gapping there between my pitching wedge and my 50 degree. There's a little better gapping there. When I had the 52, 56, or when I had the 52, the 56, and the 60, I had too much gapping in between. And I also found that I didn't use my 60 degree that much, but I use my 58 degree mostly around. It just depends on where I'm playing. If I'm playing somewhere that has really soft conditions, and I don't really need to hit a lot of spin shots, I'll use my 54 around the greens a lot, even my 50. But typically here in Florida, we're playing firm conditions, somewhat fast greens, depending on where you are. But typically, it's tight and firm. So, you're hitting a lot of spin type shots. And when I'm hitting around the green, it's usually going to be, if I'm hitting a spinner type of shot, it's going to be a 58 degree, because that's going to give you the most spin. But typically, I'm always an advocate of, if you have the green to work with, getting the ball on the green and rolling as fast as possible. That's really the highest percentage play. And I typically, do better with that. So I chip a lot with my pitching wedge if I have the green to work with. But like I said, if I have to carry the ball with some spin, that's going to be my 58 degree for sure. So Richard H says, what is weight shift doing during the entire swing? So this is a good question, because I think a lot of people, what I see in most amateurs is that they don't do this correctly. So basically, she's stretching. So basically, what ends up happening is that in the very, very start of the backswing, we want to feel pressure immediately in our trail foot. Let's actually get into there's a difference between pressure and weight, right? Most people get those confused and think that pressure is weight, and it's not really what's going on. So if I give you an example, if I'm walking, right, my pressure, when I'm stepping forward, my pressure is in my trail foot, but my weight is moving that way. So pressure is going that way, weight is going this way. My mass, my momentum is going this way. Same thing's happening in the golf swing. In the very, very beginning here, I'm putting pressure and weight moving in this direction in the very, very beginning. You want that to happen right away. Get it early in that trail foot. Then as I'm going up to the top, as I get about halfway up, now I'm pushing and my momentum is now going this way, but my pressure is still building in my foot as I go up to the top. But I have momentum going in that direction. So it's like I'm walking, right? I'm walking forward. I'm putting pressure in my foot, but my momentum's going that way. It's the same thing. You'll see not all players have lateral movement, but a lot of players, most players do, I would say. There's some that are just rotational, that they load up and that's just rotational. They get it here. There's not a lot of lateral movement, but there's going to be some players, some tour players, you'll see some lateral movement there. So Brooks Koepka, Adam Scott, you're seeing as they're reaching the top of the swing, you're seeing some lateral movement there. And that way you're getting pressure in that lead foot before you start this downswing, or as you're starting this downswing. And that allows you to get into the ground and rotate your body. What I see with most amateur players is that they load up as they go up to the top, and they don't have any momentum going up to the target. Basically, your downswing starts in the last half of your backswing. That's really when it's starting. Technically, it starts when the club switches directions, but you want to have the momentum going to your lead side before you reach the top of the swing. Otherwise, it's too late. Otherwise, if you separate the two, and let's say it's all load up, weight shift to the trail side, to the top, and then you don't get any momentum going to your lead side until basically the club switches directions, it's too late. You're not going to be able to get into the ground enough. You're probably going to release the club early because you're starting with all your upper body. Because once you start with the upper body, there's no stopping it. It's just going to go, and then you get what's called a false weight shift, where it's really the momentum of your arms and your hands in the club, bringing you around to your lead side. So what we want to have happen is we want to have initially in the first part of the backswing, you're loading up, and you're continuing to load up here. But in the last half of the backswing, you're getting momentum going to your lead side. And then basically as you're reaching the top of the swing, and sometimes before, you're getting that pressure in the lead foot, and now I'm getting into the ground, and now I can rotate and rotate my hips. That's going to bring my torso through. That's going to bring my shoulders through. That's going to get this club lagging behind, so that way I can get it to release out in front with a lot of power. That's what all tour players are doing. That's what all good ball strikers are doing. So we have some great drills for this. The best drill out there is called the step drill. And what you're doing in the step drill is you're starting with your feet together. You're getting this club going back, and as the club's going back, you're starting to step forward. So that's forcing you to get momentum going forward toward the target in your backswing, which is, it's exaggerating it because it's happening right away, but you're feeling that loading up, and that way you can get into the ground and rotate a lot better. If you practice that drill, if you're struggling with chunking, releasing the club early, those are all things that can help you out quite a bit. Is get that proper weight shift, get the sequence properly happening in the start of the downswing. So to work on that, there's a great drill. Like I said, it's called the step drill. We have it in several videos on the website, but one place you can go is search, I think it's BR014. In fact, since we don't have a question here, I'll find it and I will put it in the comments, and you can just follow the link and go work on it. All right, so I just put that in the comments there, the link to it, how to start the golf downswing correctly. That's the one. Clay demonstrates the step drill. We also do the step drill in the 20-minute distance fix. It's very important for power. That's how you get. That's how you create power with the lower body. Most of our speed comes from our arms. You can swing fairly fast doing that, but it's not going to be the most efficient way to swing. And you got more in the tank. It's not going to be 85% ish of your speed comes from your arms, really just your arms and your shoulders and your upper body. If I were to not turn my hips at all and just swing this club as fast as I could get about 85% of my max speed. But if you're not getting that proper weight shift and rotating through, you're not getting that momentum, and you're leaving some in the tank for sure. So check out that drill. Highly recommend it. It's a great one to work on that. All right, so we got a couple more minutes here. If you got any more questions, probably take one more. If not, we will go ahead and wrap it up for today. It's another minute here to get a question, and then we will wrap it up. James N says, have a nice lunch. I will. I got a salad calling my name. All right, so Andre P says, is it okay to focus on chest rotation instead of hip rotation? Do hips rotate in relationship to chest? So yeah, I mean, again, it's all about adjusting your field to get the desired result. So focusing for you on the chest rotating, because the hip you're not going to be able to go like this, right, without rotating your hips. So if the feeling of rotating your chest helps you to rotate your hips or to get everything where you want it to be, then yes, that's completely fine. It's all about finding the right feel. That's not literally what's going on. You're, like I said, you're not just going to be rotating your chest and not rotating your hips. If you rotate your chest, your hips are going to be coming along with it, you know. So yeah, that's completely fine. You got to find the right feel that works for you. So yeah, that's completely fine. All right, so thanks everybody for joining me today. We'll be back here tomorrow, 11 a.m. Eastern time. Everybody have a good rest of the day. Stay cool out there, and I will talk to you next time.